Nano. Hey, Nano. It's your main man, Connor, here in Bayeux, France. Nano, just wanted to wish you a happy birthday, tell you that I love you, and since you're one of the most important people in my life, I wanted to give you an extra special birthday gift. 2.5 months ago, when I was about to leave for my trip, you mentioned to me that one of your biggest regrets in life was that you never went to Normandy Beach. So for the next several hours, I'm going to strap this GoPro to my chest, and we are going to go on a guided tour on Omaha Beach. We're going to visit the American cemeteries and some other cool stuff. So get ready, happy birthday, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hello Tom, I'm François, I'll be your guide today. So just a quick introduction. Just to tell you that the 6th of June 1944 is just the first day of the Battle of Normandy. The Battle of Normandy did last for nearly 2 months and a half. Actually, it did last for 2 months and a half until end of August, when the last German resistance have been surrounded around Falaise by mainly Canadians and Polish troops coming from the north and American troops coming from the south. So D-Day, remember, the 6th of June 1944 is just the first day of the Battle of Normandy. The Battle of Normandy did last for 2 months and a half.
Wow.
Okay? Most of the time when we do think about the Battle of Normandy, we just remember about D-Day, the 6th of June, but it was D-Day every day, if you know what I mean, for 2 months and a half.
Right.
They do say the Battle of Normandy is the second most important battle of World War II, involving a number of soldiers who did fight. In the end of those 2 months and a half, nearly 3 million soldiers did fight in Normandy, involving tons of bombs have been dropped. You have to know that the night before D-Day and some nights after D-Day, during those 2 months and a half of the Battle of Normandy, all the big cities in Normandy have been destroyed and bombed by the Allies. All those cities like Caen, the town where I come from, Carentan, Lisieux, Cherbourg, all those big cities have been bombed the night before D-Day and some nights after D-Day during those 2 months and a half, bombed by the Allies. The reasons why the Allies wanted to bomb those cities, they wanted to destroy all the train stations, some crossroads, some main roads, some bridges, to avoid the purpose of that, to avoid the Germans to retreat, but also to counterattack.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, more than 20,000 of French civilians died during those bombings. But that's what the old generations used to say. That was the price to pay for our freedom. Couldn't be worse than 4 years of German occupation.
Right.
So all those big cities, as I said, the night before and some nights after, during those 2 months of the Battle of Normandy, 2 months and a half of the Battle of Normandy, have been destroyed, bombed for the reasons I just told you. Only 2 cities haven't been damaged at all. Bayeux, where we are today, and the other town is Honfleur. In fact, Bayeux, where we are today, is the first city who has been liberated by British troops who did land on Gaulle, 8 miles from here, the British sector of Gaulle. So Bayeux is the first city who has been liberated the day after the day, on the 7th of June, by British troops. So this is why Bayeux, because it hasn't been bombed by the Allies, this is why you can still see the old cathedral from the 11th century. All those buildings in Bayeux are mainly from the 17th, 18th centuries. You can still see some medieval houses from the 14th, 15th centuries. It's because, as I said, Bayeux is the only city with Honfleur who hasn't been damaged at all.
Okay.
That was just a little quick
Nah,
introduction.
yeah, sounds good.
So now the program this afternoon, we're gonna start with La Pointe du Hoc. La Pointe du Hoc, that's my favorite site. Everything's still exactly the same how it was after D-Day. You're gonna see a lot of bomb craters, a lot of German bunkers. It's quite an amazing site, and that's also quite an amazing story of what happened there 70 years ago. If you have seen that film, The Longest Day, all the making of that film has been filmed on the actual spots where all of that did happen. So if you have seen that film, and if you can remember that scene where those rangers had to climb that cliff to find and destroy some German guns, this is where we're going right now. The reason why I'm talking about that film is because all the making of that film has been filmed on the actual spots where all of that did happen. Except the scene of Omaha, which has been filmed in the south of France. And so first of all, we're going to La Pointe du Hoc. La Pointe du Hoc, that was the mission for the 2nd Battalion of Rangers, to climb that cliff, to find some German guns and to destroy them. And after we'll go to Omaha Beach. We know that the Americans on D-Day, they had 2 sectors, Utah and Omaha Beach. Utah Beach has been the less difficult sector. Omaha has been the worst sector. So this is where we're going after La Pointe du Hoc. We're going to Omaha Beach, and after Omaha Beach we'll go to the American Cemetery on top of the cliff of Omaha in Colville. And after, if we have time, we'll do a second stop on the top of the cliff of Omaha. So as I said to you, the Norman landscape, you're going to understand much easier with a picture. The Norman landscape, a bit like a mosaic of little fields, each of them surrounded by those hedgerows. Can you see? That's a perfect example.
Right.
So you have to imagine American troops once they want to cross that open air, that open field. They don't know what is on each side behind those hedgerows. So as I said, the Norman landscape that we call the bocage, mosaic of little fields, each of them surrounded by those hedgerows. And also that's also very hilly, as I said. And also separating those fields, we cannot see that on that picture because that's an aerial view. But separating those fields, there was always a little way like that, you know, a little way, very very narrow way, you know, made of dirt. Even they were so narrow that even the Sherman tanks, so they couldn't use any vehicles to drive on those little narrow ways separating those fields.
Looks like there are tracks here, though. Huh?
Yes, but most of the time they were so narrow they couldn't use the
right.
tanks or any vehicles.
Interesting.
Okay. So did you get that? The Norman landscape, as I said,
yeah.
A mosaic of little fields, each of them surrounded by those hedgerows. Those hedgerows, as I said, they can be so thick in the summertime that you cannot see through. You never know what is behind. So now we know that in 1933 Adolf Hitler became a Chancellor of Germany and did lead the country to war. It started really in 1938 when Germany did invade the Sudets in Czechoslovakia. Nobody did move, but when a year later the German army did attack Poland on the 1st September 1939, the French and British governments did declare war to Germany. So for us in Europe, the war started on the 1st September 1939. Okay. The Canadians also did declare war straight to Germany. The Canadians have been involved straight from the beginning of World War II. So remember that the World War II in Europe started on the 1st September 1939. The first 8 months of the war, nothing much happened really. That's what we do call the funny war. The two armies, the French and Germans, were looking at each other without fighting really. But when on the 10th of May 1940 the German army did attack France, the Battle of France was lost just in 6 weeks' time with the famous evacuation of Dunkirk in the north of France, where 350,000 mainly British troops, some French and Belgian troops, did evacuate end of June 1940 Dunkirk to go back to England. So as I said, World War II started in Europe the 1st September 1939, but the German occupation in France started in June 1940 for 4 long years.
Right.
Okay. By the way, by 1940, mid-1940, all Europe was occupied by the German army. All Europe was occupied by the German army. All those blue countries are the countries occupied by the German army. Spain and Portugal was neutral. Spain was neutral, kind of. Switzerland was neutral too, always has been. Sweden was neutral also, and Republic of Ireland also was neutral. So by 1940, as I said, only England was resisting to the German army. Only England.
I thought Belgium was neutral too, no?
During World War One.
Okay, yeah, not too.
So by 1940, only England was resisting to the German army. Only England and Iceland.
Okay.
Iceland. Who would bother to invade Iceland? It's too cold and full of volcanoes. I know you've been there.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. But you know, even Adolf Hitler did not bother. Anyway. So by 1940, as I said, all Europe was occupied by the German army, and the Germans knew that sooner or later the Allies will come back to land somewhere. They just did not know where and when. So this is why they started to build what we do call mid-1941. They started to build what we do call the Atlantic Wall. The Atlantic Wall is the Germans' defenses all along the European coastlines. So it starts from the Spanish-French border, all along the Atlantic coast of France, all along Brittany, all along Normandy, where we are today, north of France, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, up to north of Norway. It represents more than 3,000 miles of Germany's defense. All along the European coastlines.
Wow.
That's what we do call the Atlantic Wall. The Germans defense the Atlantic Wall. But it's not a long wall like we can imagine, like the wall or the Great Wall of China. No, every 5-10 miles from south of France to north of Norway, every 5-10 miles, German batteries with bunkers and heavy guns, guns like that one, guns with a range of 12-15 miles or more. And that's what we do call the Atlantic Wall. From the south of France to north of Norway, every 5-10 miles, strong German hold points with bunkers and heavy guns. But also, what you will have find, all the beaches, again from the south of France to north of Norway, all the beaches used to look like that. You had different kind of obstacles on those beaches, and that was part of the Atlantic Wall, the Germans' defense all along the European coastlines. So for example, for 4 years of German occupation, you couldn't go on the beach in the summertime to have a little bath. You just couldn't, and that was full of obstacles, full of mines, full of barbed wire. So we had, for example, on those beaches kind of obstacles you could have found. That's the Czech hedgehogs, obstacles made of steel as high as that, but if you put them side by side like on that picture, you just cannot get through with any tanks or any vehicles. The Rommel's asparagus, as you can see, those are just wooden sticks buried in the sand, but on top of it a mine. Rommel's asparagus because from the General Rommel. General Rommel, after the North African campaign 1942-1943, end of 1943, General Rommel was on charge of those German defenses all along the French coastlines. And when he did visit Normandy in January 1944, he did reinforce a lot those German defenses, especially in Normandy, because the Germans were waiting for the main landing to take place in the north of France, the closest to England. By the way, from Normandy to south of England, this is only 100 miles. By the way, that sea between France and England, please don't spoil my day, don't call it the English Channel. Just the channel will be enough. Or
Okay.
La Manche. We call it La Manche, not the French La Manche. We are supposed to be the arrogant ones, but those English sometimes are worse than us. So from England, from Normandy to England, that's 100 miles. Now, from the north of France to south of England, this is only 15 miles. So the German army was waiting for the main landing to take place in the north of France, the closest to England. And for that, the Allies did everything possible to make them believe that. But General Rommel was a bit smarter than the rest of the German army, and he knew it was too obvious the main landing to happen where everybody was waiting for. He knew that the landing could happen in Normandy. So when he did reinforce a lot those German defenses, especially in Normandy. So those Rommel's asparagus, not only you will have find them on those beaches as an obstacle, but you will have find them also in those fields. A lot of those fields were full of Rommel's asparagus and barbed wire all across those fields. The reason for that is to make the job much harder for gliders to land or for the paratroopers.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And also General Rommel did think about, on the American sectors there is few rivers. On those rivers there is some locked gates. General Rommel did think about to close those locked gates. So when those locked gates are closed on those rivers, the water cannot run anymore to the sea and it floods all those areas and fields. Again, the purpose of that is to make the job much harder for gliders and for paratroopers. And it happens that he was right. So to finish, so all those beaches again from the south of France to north of Norway, as I said, will have looked like that. You had different kind of obstacles: the Czech hedgehogs, the Rommel's asparagus, the tetras, the Belgium gates, millions of mines buried and barbed wire everywhere. All those beaches will have looked like that. And this is why it really was important on the day. 3 very important factors on the day: the full moon the night before for those paratroopers who have been dropped the night before, low tide early in the morning to be able to see all those obstacles, because when this is high tide, those obstacles are underneath the water, you cannot see them anymore. So they really needed the low tide. And the third factor is air supremacy of the air. I will tell you much more about that later. So now on the day, as I said to you, we have 5 sectors. we have 2 British sectors, Sword and Gold, 1 Canadian sector, Juno, and 2 American sectors, Utah and Omaha. As I said to you, the night before D-Day, the night from the 5th to the 6th of June, 3 airborne divisions have been dropped. 2 American Airborne Division, the 82nd Airborne Division, AA, and the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, to protect the western flank, and 1 British Airborne Division, the 6th, to protect the eastern flank. And now this is where we are. La Pointe du Hoc is right in the middle of the 2 American sectors. Utah Beach, 8-9 miles this way, and Omaha, 4 miles this way. And the reason why it really was important for the 2nd Battalion of Rangers under the command of Colonel Rudder to climb that cliff, it's because on top of that cliff, La Pointe du Hoc, there was 6 of those guns. 155mm guns with a range between 12 and 15 miles. So the Germans, with those 6 guns with a range of between 12 and 15 miles from La Pointe du Hoc, could fire on both American sectors on D-Day. Does it make sense? As I said, Utah Beach, 8-9 miles this way, Omaha, 4 miles this way. Those guns had a range between 12 and 15 miles. So as I said, that was the mission for the 2nd Battalion of Rangers, to climb that cliff, to find those guns and to destroy them. Was it clear enough?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right? So by the way, those guns there, if you go have a look, those guns are French made. Plutôt. From 1970.
They're French made and used by the Germans?
Yes, but that's what happened when Germany did invade the country. They used to take all the weapons and guns and use them for themselves. And they were part of the Maginot Line. The French defense all along with the border with Germany.
Right.
But in fact, the Germans did attack France through Belgium, and they did take the French army from the rear. So that Maginot Line was completely useless. The problem is we did start that Maginot Line from the Swiss border. In fact, the Maginot Line was going from Switzerland to Belgium, all along the border with Germany. To be very efficient, they should have built that Maginot Line to the sea. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Because that's what the Germans did in fact, and they did not attack straight France. They did pass through Belgium and take the French army from the rear. In La Pointe du Hoc, in fact, a German battery is a bit like an iceberg. What you see is just the tip of it. There's much more bunkers than we can see.
Right.
A lot of those bunkers, like that one, there's 12, 14 of those bunkers are on the ground. As I said, this is why a German battery is a bit like an iceberg. What you see is just the tip of it. There's always much bunkers than we can see. There's around 12, 14 of them. That one, for example, used to be a living quarter where the German could rest, eat and sleep. Beside, this is another living quarter, but beside that's a garage, and there's also a hospital on the ground. So don't hesitate after, during your free time, to walk and to have a look on inside the bunker.
Okay.
The guns, the bunkers that we see are for the big guns. But almost of the time, those garages, those living quarters, those hospitals were on the ground always. And that's typical also, this is where we're going on top of that bunker over there. And that's typical of a German bunker. There's always, can you see that circle over there?
Yeah.
So you have some stairs, you have the entrance. That used to be a machine gun position. It's typical of a German bunker. There is always on top of it a machine gun position. They could use to fire at 360 degrees. Also called Tobruk. Tobruk, that's the name of a town in Libya, where a famous battle did take place during the North African campaign, 1942-1943. The African campaign, that's the first, you know that the Americans at first did not want to be involved in World War II.
Right.
President Roosevelt has been elected for the 3rd time, promising the American citizens that they wouldn't get involved in the European conflict. Unfortunately,
Pearl
7th
Harbor.
December 1941 did happen. You've been attacked by the Japanese force, but even though you still did not declare war to Germany and Italy. Since Germany and Italy who did declare war to United States 3 days after Pearl Harbor. So
Really?
Yes.
Wasn't aware of that.
No. So but check that out. That's Germany and Italy who did declare war to United States 3 days after Pearl Harbor. So you did not have the choice anymore. You had to be involved. And it started with the North African campaign in November 1942.
Wow. This is quite the view, huh?
That's quite. This is why I like to do my little speech over there. So Utah Beach, can you see that long beach at the horizon?
Yeah.
This is Utah Beach at the horizon. That long beach at the horizon. Can you see it?
Yeah.
8-9 miles. And Omaha starts after that one over there. So we have Utah Beach 8-9 miles this way, and Omaha starts after that point over there.
Okay.
Okay. So now, can you see that circle, that big circle over there?
Yeah.
I do show you that one because this one is intact. This is where those guns were placed. The gun I did show you, remember there was 6 of them.
Yeah.
This is where those guns were placed. So there was 6 guns, there was 6 guns on placement, 3 that side, 3 the other side. That's the remain of another one. We can still see half of it only. That there. So those guns, as I said, they were placed on open air guns on placement, only camouflaged with a net. Like on the picture I'm going to show you right now. Let me find it. Here we are. Those guns, as I said, they were placed on open air guns on placement, only camouflaged with a net. Okay. So now what we do call in fact Operation Overlord. Operation Overlord starts in fact 90 days before D-Day and was supposed to finish 90 days after D-Day. In fact, it finished 80 days before D-Day. It starts 90 days before D-Day because remember what I did tell you, 3 very important factors on D-Day. Full moon the night before for the paratroopers, low tide early in the morning, and the third factor, air supremacy, supremacy of the air. So this is why 90 days before D-Day, that's when the Allies started to bomb German airfields in France to make sure that on D-Day they wouldn't find any German planes. And also 90 days before, that's when they started to intensify those bombings in Germany. You know, by 1944, the Germans had just little air force left. So to make them busy, that's why they intensify those bombings in Germany to make busy the little air force the Germans still have left by 1944. Does it make sense? And also 90 days before D-Day, that's when they started to bomb all those German defenses all along the French coastlines. But for one bomb dropped anywhere in France, 2 bombs were dropped in the north of France to make believe the Germans, as I said, that the main landing will happen in the north of France. And so, as I said, for one bomb dropped all along the French coastlines, 2 bombs were dropped in the north of France to make believe the Germans, as I said, that the main landing will take place in the north of France. So now, that's what we do call north of France. Where was I? So I'm looking for a picture. Okay. So 90 days before, that's when they started to bomb those German defenses, as I said to you. And what happened is in April 1944, a couple of months before the day, in April 1944, that's when the Allies started to bomb La Pointe-du-Hoc. And during that raid, it took place in April 1944, a couple of months before the day, one of those 6 guns had been destroyed. Remember, they were only placed on open air guns on placement, only camouflaged with a net. One of the 6 guns had been destroyed. So the Germans decided to remove those guns, the 5 guns left, and they wanted to build 5 bunkers, bomb-proof for the 5 guns left. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Now, on D-Day, as I said, the 6th of June 1944, that was the mission for the 2nd Battalion of Rangers. Every time there was a tough mission, they always used to ask the Rangers or the Canadians, like in Dieppe, August 1942. Completely disaster. Anyway, the Rangers, they were the elite troops. They were trained much harder than any other troops. And they were all draftees, they were all volunteers. And the reason what did motivate them to be in the Rangers force most of the time, that's because the money. They used to be paid $50 a month more than any other soldiers. But as I said, they were the elite troops. Every time there was a tough mission, they always used to ask the Rangers. And so here, the original plan for those 225 Rangers only, 225 Rangers only got on board of Higgins boat around 5 o'clock in the morning. The original plan for those Rangers, they were supposed to be, can you see that statue over there?
Yeah.
The statue, by the way, represents a dagger. The dagger, this is the Ranger's knife. And that statue is on the top of the German observation post. Once I'll finish with you, I will advise you to visit that German observation post. You can get inside, but also I will advise you to walk all around. So you're gonna see how steep the cliff is and how tricky the landscape is to attack. So the original plan for those 225 Rangers, they were supposed to be at the feet of the cliff at 6 in the morning. They were supposed to climb that cliff from both sides. They were supposed to be at the top of the cliff at 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, they were supposed to send a signal. There was 500 other Rangers on board of Higgins boats, 3-4 miles from here, waiting for that signal at 7 o'clock for the reinforcement. That was the original plan. Now, it went wrong from the beginning. You have to know that on the day the weather was miserable. It was cold, much cold, pretty cold for June. It was very cloudy and it was even raining. It was very cloudy, and because also they all did land at 6:30 in the morning. Utah, La Pointe du Hoc and Omaha, they all did land at 6:30 in the morning. But 45 minutes, 30 minutes, started 6:45, we have aerial and naval bombardments to affect the Germans' defense. So not only it was very cloudy, but because those aerial and naval bombardments, we started 6:45, 7 o'clock, sorry, 5:45, 6 o'clock. Not only it was very cloudy, but it was also very smoky, very dusty. And so what happened is those 225 Rangers, instead to come to that point, they went to the wrong point over there. They went to that point, excuse me, they went to the wrong point over there. They went to that point over there called La Pointe de la Percée. On the top of La Pointe de la Percée, on the 6th of June 1944, there was a radar, there was a German radar station. And so when those Rangers on board of the Higgins boats, those 225 Rangers, instead to get to that point, they went to the wrong point, they went to that point over there. And when they nearly did reach the feet of that point, they did see that there was some German radars on top of the cliff. That's when they did realize, oh, there is something wrong here. We have to destroy some guns, nothing to do with radars. So that's when they did realize that wasn't the right point. So they had to come back this way, sailing on board of the Higgins boats. And coming back this way to go to the right point, coming back this way on board of the Higgins boats, where that bunker is over there. Can you see that bunker over there? Can you see that bunker over there?
Yeah.
Yes. So where that bunker is over there, they did realize that part of the cliff did collapse because the aerial and naval bombardment, some shells did hit the cliff several times, so the cliff did collapse. So those Rangers decided to climb that cliff where it did collapse. I'm going to show you a picture. Here we are. As I said, where that bunker is, as I said, because the cliff has been hit several times by naval bombardments, so the cliff did collapse. So those Rangers decided, in fact, to climb that cliff where it did collapse. As you can see, it makes the job a bit more easier. There's much less to climb. So using some grappling hooks and ladders, mainly ladders, because the problem is on D-Day the sea was very rough, was too rough, and the rope for those grappling hooks got wet. And when the rope is wet, it's much heavier, so you cannot launch those grappling hooks. So mainly, and thanks God for that, they did borrow ladders from the firemen of London. So mainly they did climb that cliff using ladders, while the Germans were still firing at them.
Wow.
I mean, just crazy. At least for the ones who have been able to reach the top of that cliff, it did not take them that long. After just 45 minutes, an hour of fighting, they've been able to secure La Pointe du Hoc. But when they went to those open-air guns emplacement to destroy those guns, what did they find? What did they find? Absolutely nothing. The only things they did find is some telegraph wooden post. So you can imagine the disappointment of those rangers. You have to know that D-Day was supposed to happen on the 5th of June, but because bad weather, it has been postponed to the 6th of June, even though on the 6th of June the weather wasn't that better. The reason why I'm saying that is because all the soldiers and rangers, they all got on board of boats in England, started the 3rd of June. All of them did wait for at least 3 days on board of those boats. Plenty of time to ask yourself, how am I gonna die tomorrow? Here they have to cross that sea that night. As I said, that night the sea was pretty rough, and also that's how they used to think 70 years ago, knowing that a lot of the soldiers were going to die the day after the last meal, they thought we better feed them well. That's not a good idea on the rough sea, because this is why a lot of those soldiers, a lot of those rangers the day after were seasick. And when you are seasick, you are losing 50–60% of your energy. So here you are, you have to climb that cliff under German sparring to find out that there was no guns here. But what happened is the Colonel Roder, who was in charge of those rangers, by pure chance, pure luck, he did send a patrol to secure that little road that we did use to come here, half of a mile from here. Those roads, remember, 70 years ago, used to be made of dirt. And when that patrol did reach that road, they did see, only 3 of those rangers, they didn't notice that there was some marks and traces made by wheels. So they just did follow those marks and traces, and those marks and traces did lead them to a wood where the 5 guns left were hidden. Because what happened, as I said, because in April 1944, a couple of months before the day, one of those guns have been destroyed. Remember, there were 6 of them. April 1944, a couple of months before the day, one of those guns have been destroyed. So the Germans decided to remove those guns, to hide them, and they wanted to build, as I said, 5 bunkers, bomb-proof. But by the 6th of June 1944, a couple of months after, they only had the time to finish 2 of those 5 bunkers. That bunker here and that other one over there. So waiting for the 5 bunkers to be built, as I said, they did remove them, did hide them. But it doesn't take that long to build those bunkers. What takes long is for the concrete to dry.
Right.
So by pure chance, as I said, pure luck, those rangers, when finally they did find those guns. The problem now is they did not have any equipment with them to destroy those guns. The only thing they still have left was some phosphorus grenades. Phosphorus is such a hot chemical. When you put those grenades inside the guns, the barrel of the gun, it's so hot that it melts the steel. But the mission was accomplished, as I said, by pure chance, pure luck. They did find those 5 guns and did destroy them.
Wow.
Now, to finish quickly my story, as I said, 225 rangers got on board of Higgins' boat to attack that position. But by the time they went to the wrong cliff over there, they did lose 2 Higgins boats. By the time they were at the foot of the cliff, where that bunker is, where the cliff did collapse, they were 190. By the time they did reach the top of the cliff, 150, and it was 7:15, 7:20. Because they did lose and waste time to go to the wrong point over there. As I said, when finally they did reach the top of it, where the bunker is, where the cliff did collapse, it was 7:20. And the reinforcement, remember, those 500 other rangers waiting for the signal at 7 o'clock was already gone. That was the plan. If those 500 other rangers for the reinforcement did not have that signal at 7 o'clock, the plan for them, that was to go and land on Omaha, and so they did. Okay, so there was no reinforcement. It was too late. So as I said, they did lose 2 Higgins boats by going to the wrong point over there. They were 190 feet of the cliff where the cliff did collapse, 150 top of the cliff, and that's when the trouble started really. Even though they did find those guns by pure chance, pure luck, and they did destroy them, that's when the trouble started. Because those rangers, once they did find and destroy those guns, they were supposed to be relieved on D-Day at 12 o'clock by troops who did land on Omaha. Remember, Omaha only 4 miles from here. As I said, that's when the trouble started, because it did take those troops 2 days to reach those rangers.
Wow.
So for 2 days, those rangers had to defend themselves against many German counterattacks, many German bombings. In the end of those 2 days, only 90 rangers were still able to fight out of 225. As I said, the mission was accomplished by pure chance, pure luck. They did find finally those guns and did destroy them, but with a heavy cost.
Yeah.
As I said, out of 225, only 90 rangers were still able to fight. I'm going to show you a picture. Was it clear enough?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's great.
I'm just going to show you one picture. Remember, they started to bomb La Pointe du Hoc in April 1944. From April 1944 to the 6th of June 1944, they did bomb twice La Pointe du Hoc. And on D-Day, remember, for half an hour, 45 minutes before they did land, aerial and naval bombardment. So all those holes that you see are bomb craters. That's how La Pointe du Hoc used to look like. Can you see all those holes, all those bomb craters?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like more like the landscape of a moon, really, more than anything else. Okay, this is La Pointe du Hoc over there. Once you'll be walking all around that German observation post, you're gonna understand why we call that site La Pointe du Hoc. We cannot see it from here, but once you'll be walking all around, you're gonna see a big piece of rock looking like a point.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we do call that site La Pointe du Hoc. Was it clear enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Connor?
Between Vierville-sur-Mer, where we are, to Colleville-sur-Mer on the other side. So physically, from the point you have over there, Cape Puente de la Percée, where we had a raider, so just around the point you have the gun battery you just seen, to I don't know if you see, I can see it, you certainly don't. There is a white lighthouse on the top of the cliff. Do you see it if you fix? So this is the end of Omaha Beach. So here on this beach landed most of the soldiers on D-Day. 34 to 35,000 American soldiers landed right here on D-Day. They were divided in two infantry divisions, the 29th, so the National Guard units, and the 1st Infantry Division. So here everybody was under the orders of General Bradley and General Giraud. So the objectives, the missions of the Americans were to create two beachheads. First beachhead between Vierville-sur-Mer, God forbidden beach. Vierville-sur-Mer, so actually first mission was to create a beachhead between Vierville-sur-Mer and Port-en-Bessin, to isolate Omaha Beach and to keep the Germans back inland. And once in Port-en-Bessin, the 1st Infantry Division had to link up with the British coming from Gold Beach in order to have a continued beachhead to, I would say, the end of Juno Beach with the Canadians. And on the other side, so the 29th, they had then to go to Grand Camp, to Isigny, and then to Saint-Jean-de-Day in order to link up with the soldiers coming from Utah Beach and to have a constant beachhead between Utah and finally Sword Beach without any interruptions. But everything didn't happen as previewed, of course. So here for the Americans, there were two problems to face when they landed here. But before talking about those problems, so here, just to tell you, the beach, as you see now, is a little bit different from what it was in 1944. So first of all, the wall you have here, the breakwater wall, as well as the houses and the road, didn't exist. We just had a beach here, kind of mud, and with the vegetation and the cliffs. The road we came from didn't exist either. It was not a public beach. It was just here cliffs, and with the beach here. The roads were created by the Americans, and then actually were updated, I would say, to the modern circulation when the beach was open to the public. So at 3:30 a.m., you remember what I told you in April and May, the bombings on the beach were completely inefficient. Most of the obstacles were still on the beach on D-Day. So that's why at 3:30 we had a new campaign of bombings here, air and naval shots, to destroy first of all a maximum of obstacles on the beach and to try to neutralize the bunkers we had all along the beach. Unfortunately, it was not enough. At 5:30 we had the Pathfinders. So the Pathfinders, or the Frogmen, they had two missions. First mission with a special tank, they had to create some breaches through the sand, through the pebbles, in order so to avoid the soldiers being spread a little bit everywhere and disorganized. So this tank was used by the Pathfinders. This is what we call, so this is a Sherman tank, this is a flail tank. So this tank, you can see, so this is the front of the tank here. This tank was composed of two drums on the front with hooks and chains with which rotated very quickly in order so on the sand to dig the sand and to make the anti-personnel mines explode, sorry, and also to hit the pebbles and to do the same thing. Then once here, so the Pathfinders, they had another mission, so to establish a little bit and to secure those breaches through the beach, and to put the markers indicating the different sectors of Omaha. So Omaha, like the four other beaches, were divided in different sectors. So Sector 1, Charlie. Sector 2, Dog. Sector 3, Easy. Sector 4, Fox. Each of those sectors, except Charlie here, were divided in small zones. Green, white, red, green, red, green, red. So Utah Beach, we had Uncle and Tear for the sectors. Juneau, we had 3 sectors, Mike, Love, and Nan, etc. So from Charlie to Easy Green, we had the 29th Infantry Division. From Easy Red to Fox Red, the 1st. So Charlie sector, this is a sector between the point you have there and the pier here. Between the pier, I'm not going too fast? No. The pier and the house with the American flag here, we have the green, then the white, the red, etc. So after those bombings, the patrollers, they came back to the warships and they said with their lights, okay, you can come now, the beach is safe, you can come, but take the breaches we created. And at 6:30 a.m. was launched the amphibious landing on this beach. First of all, 15,000 soldiers landed here. So you can see this is low tide. Actually, this is the distance, more or less, the soldiers had to run between the sea and the cliffs. So without the bridge here, etc. But when they landed here, so they had 2 problems to face. So those problems were, first of all, the beach itself. Look at this beautiful sandy beach. In 1944, 80% of Omaha was rocky beach. And among those pebbles, a lot of obstacles were put by the Germans. So first of all, here, actually, I'll show you a picture of Omaha. So we had different lines of obstacles. So from the cliffs to the beach. So here in the foreground, you don't see them, but you have the cliffs here. First rank of barbed wires, just here, so protecting the cliffs, the foot of the cliffs. Then we have those obstacles. Those obstacles, they were recruited from the Maginot Line. They are called the Dragon's Teeth, made of concrete, very heavy and very hard to remove. Then here a second rank of barbed wire, just here, coupled with an anti-tank ditch. And then on the beach itself, we had 6 different lines of defense. First of all, from the furthest to the closest. The furthest, we have those obstacles. Okay? And most of the obstacles on the beach by high tide were completely flooded. So we call those obstacles the Ramos asparagus. We had different types. So first line, more or less, a mile offshore. Okay? Then second line, other Ramos asparagus, but those ones. Wooden post with anti-personnel mines. Okay? Third line, we had mixed the Bergin gates. I show you an exemplary on the way to the cemetery, and tetrahedrons. So the tetrahedrons, I don't know if you noticed on the field nearby, so on the side of the floating road, we have some obstacles which look like a triangle. I don't know if you noticed that on the way. So like this, so tetrahedrons, which were dug inside to welcome an anti-personnel mine. And then, so the last line was constituted of those obstacles you can see in the movies, like Saving Private Ryan, the Czech hedgehogs, so those metal crosses. Those metal crosses, so either they were put directly on the sand, or they were trapped in some concrete bases. Actually, why this name, Czech hedgehog? Nothing to see with Czechoslovakia or the animal. Simply, the spikes here were very dangerous. Well, not directly with Czechoslovakia, because they were not produced in Czechoslovakia, but in Germany by a Czech factory, Skoda. Very dangerous, so by high tide especially. So here we had more or less 5,000 different obstacles all along Omaha Beach, and most of them were still on the beach. First problem. Second problem for the Americans to face, you can see all along Omaha we have cliffs. Those cliffs, maybe they are a little bit lower than Pointe du Hoc, but very steep, so impossible to climb. Moreover, the Germans, between 1942 and 1944, they built in the cliffs 15 main bunkers. You can see some of them behind you. So those bunkers, there were numbered. So from WN60 on my map here on X-ray, WN73, Charlie second. WN means Widerstands nest. Widerstands nest in English, nest of resistance. So the WN73, this is the bunker you have in the cliff there. You see it? So in this bunker we had a 105mm cannon. This cannon shot on the other side on the beach. This time we had another bunker which was not exactly the same, but another bunker with exactly the same cannon which shot that way. Crossfire shots, of course. This bunker just here, this is the WN72. So a little thing about the movie Saving Private Ryan. Please forget it a moment. It's not really accurate what you see in the movie. Well, maybe except the 31st minutes depicting you what kind of hell it was on the beach. But the bunker WN72, the way it's shot in the movie Private Ryan, looks like more one of the bunkers we saw Pointe du Hoc than the real one, which is just here. So in this bunker here we have two cannons, 175 on the left, 1 2mm on the right, and they were both mortar cannons, so with a very short range. They shot like a gun. But the same on the other side. Here in this bunker, so I give you a free time also to take some pictures. You have WN71, this bunker here, where we had and we still have the 88mm anti-tank cannon. This is the bunker which is just here.
Wow.
And the same on the other side, of course. And we had 15 like this and 4 anti-aircraft cannons, 2 88mm, 120, 137. But actually for the Americans, those bunkers were not a real threat. Why? Because from the shore, those bunkers, they could be visible, they could be seen by the infantry divisions. So they could be shot without any problems. The problems were more the small bunkers which were built directly in the cliffs. I don't know if you see between the two houses, you have a hole. Actually, this is a bunker here with a bunker. So inside this bunker, we had more or less 100 all along Omaha. So in this bunker, we had two soldiers with an MG42, so one of the most powerful rifles. And those soldiers very well hidden by the vegetation. They could shoot as many soldiers as they wanted without being seen by those American soldiers. Actually, the real threat were those small little bunkers and not the biggest one. So to protect the soldiers a little bit better, because those bombings failed, Bradley decided to use a special tank. So this one, this is another Sherman tank in its amphibious version. So this is what we call a Hobart Fanny. So this is the DD tank, Duplex Drive tank. Donald Duck, it was the unofficial name. So this tank was put 3 miles offshore on the water by high tide. The skirt was raised up, the two propellers were put in action, and on the water, ta-da-da, we have this tank. Very hard to recognize it. Actually, the skirt was very high and covered the turret with the cannon, so the problem was to shoot from the sea with those tanks. So once arrived here, of course, the skirt was raised down, the two propellers were stopped, and this tank became a regular M4 Sherman tank and could shoot the positions here. 65 Duplex Drive tanks were used all along Omaha Beach. 29 for the 29th Infantry Division and 25 for the 25th. Actually, the 29th Infantry Division was the less experienced of the two infantry divisions. Why? Because most of the soldiers who were in this division never fought before coming here. They just trained in England or in Ireland, in Scotland. That's it. They never fought. Unlike the 1st Infantry Division, most of the soldiers fought in North Africa, for example, or in Italy against Rommel. And so 29 tanks were launched here. So 6:30, first wave. The tanks, they were here, unfortunately an hour later, so everything didn't happen as previewed. Only an hour later, we had only 5 tanks which were on the beach working. 5 out of the 65 tanks. What happened to all the other tanks? We have 3 tanks which stayed stuck in their warships because the gates of the warships didn't want to open up, so they were kept for the second wave, but most of the tanks sank. Why did they sink so quickly? Of course, they were tested in England. Those different tanks. They were tested by rough weather conditions. The problem, they were put too far away offshore, and with the tide, with the sea at the moment, the current, either those things they were swinging, and shoop, flipped over, or the current came and the water came over the skirts of the tanks, flooded the tanks, and the tanks sank. Imagine in each of the tanks we had 5 soldiers. 5 multiplied by more or less 50 tanks. Imagine how many soldiers stayed trapped aboard of their tanks. Most of them couldn't go out because the tanks they sank very quickly, and most of the soldiers actually didn't swim. So lots of them were and are still in the bottom of the English Channel.
The tanks are still
in
there.
their tanks. Most of the tanks are still in the bottom of the channel. First wave of soldiers. So imagine once the tanks disappeared, the soldiers they were completely uncovered, especially here. They just had the cliffs here. The 1st Infantry Division, for most of the soldiers, they were protected with a sandy dune. So here, the soldiers inexperienced, not very well protected, they had to run 800 meters, 800 yards to reach a cliff's edge. And in 800 yards, everything could happen, and the worst, especially here. The only way to be protected for a soldier was behind a German obstacle. It was the only thing. Or maybe to run very quickly and to reach the cliff's edge and be hidden behind a tree. That's the only solution the soldiers had to be protected and to avoid being killed. At the end of the first hour, we already had 800 casualties on Omaha Beach. More or less 400 of them died. Especially on the side because they were not so well protected and they were young soldiers and experienced, so most of them could never fight. 7:30, Bradley decided to continue. Of course, he couldn't stop the progression of the operation, so he decided to send more or less 10,000 other soldiers. So those soldiers that were spread on the side here and at the center of Omaha Beach. 1st Infantry Division didn't need too much help, so most of the reinforcement was concentrated here. And 65, so 70 tanks were launched here. This time the tanks they were put a mile offshore. So most of them were on the beach around 9. The tide was up at 9. Imagine a lot of soldiers here at 9:30. They had the water until the chest, until the neck. And imagine the color of the sea. Today the sea is pretty good. It's so turquoise, so blue and green. But on the day it was red, bloody red. And imagine the soldiers, so they were, I would say, walking blind, completely blind, because they could walk on anti-personnel mines, they could walk on artifacts, they could walk even worse on their comrades who were drowned or who were killed by the German soldiers. It was very, very hard. So most of the tanks actually arrived to the beach and they started to work, but very, very few of them could be successful in their missions because once on the beach, the German anti-tank cannons opened the fire and neutralized those cannons here. So at 10 o'clock, the situation was this one. More or less 1,000 casualties on the beach, 1,200 casualties on the beach here. Most of the tanks were still stuck here. We had the first wave of Rangers, which was sent at 10 to try to create a first breach through the cliffs and to make the soldiers go through. It was very complicated. Actually, the first wave of first wave of engineers, they had to land just here, so to create D1 just here. But with the current, they landed on the other side, and they landed so in front of WN65. So the cannon was already neutralized. So the American engineers then they had just to jump over the anti-tank ditch and to create the breach just here. So this breach actually was open around 10:30, 11, and the soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division, so they could go inland and liberate the village of Saint-Laurent. But the situation was desperate for the Americans, and at 11, Bradley had a solution: to retreat, to go back to England and abandon the beach. Actually, Eisenhower, when he knew what was happening on the beach, he was very surprised. As I told you, he was thinking that Utah Beach would be much, well, more dangerous than Omaha Beach with the 5-gun batteries. It was all the opposite. And Eisenhower said to Bradley, you know, I know it's very hard on the beach, but you can't abandon. You have to attack. You have to attack to continue. We can't let a big hole, no man's land between Utah and Gold Beach without any landings, any soldiers. It would be dramatic for us or for the British on the other side. So of course, as a general, he continued. Actually, even if Bradley was a 3-star general and was a part of the CHEF, so the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, he was working with Eisenhower. Eisenhower had a higher rank than Bradley, so Bradley had to listen to Eisenhower. So finally, they continued, and we had another wave of soldiers. So this time, so other soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division, so who landed on the other side and could finally create the second exit. E3 just here was open around noon. F1 at 1 p.m., D3 at 3, and D1 at 5. But the situation was still very problematic here. The first soldiers who arrived at the cliff's edge, they tried to make the communication with the soldiers who were aboard of the warships. Imagine they had small radios, but the radios for most of them didn't function because they took too much humidity. So they didn't function, and the walkie-talkies didn't have enough range to permit the communication with the warships there. So very complicated to give the position and to give the situation of this part of the beach. So the soldiers there, they tried in the afternoon. We saw some of the Americans trying to climb the cliffs bare hands or with their daggers, but when most of them arrived in the middle of the cliffs, so they were shot by the soldiers who were inside the small bunkers. WN-71, this cannon here, 88 millimeters, was neutralized at 1 p.m. Actually, most of the cannons were neutralized in the middle of the afternoon. But it was still a problem here, those little bunkers. So at 3, we had another reinforcement. This time, the Rangers, the 5th and the 6th Battalion of Rangers. So they had to support originally our Rangers of Pointe du Hoc. They landed just here. So they had with the Rangers to reach the cliffs, to put some dynamites and to explode the cliffs in order to go through the cliffs. Finally, the situation was very hard. A lot of soldiers were trapped also by the tide, because at 3 in the afternoon we had once again high tide. Very, very problematic. So Bradley had only one solution: to use the Air Force and the Navy to knock out the upper part of the cliff in order to neutralize, to destroy those bunkers and to kill those German soldiers there. So actually Bradley used first of all the Air Force. Not the American Air Force, first of all. Why? Because most of the aircraft were flying over Utah Beach and dropping or reinforcing the paratroopers. So Bradley here asked to General Montgomery to send some aircraft to bomb the upper parts of the cliff. You can see the end of the cliff there. So just around the corner you have Gold Beach, which starts. So it was very easy. 7 aircraft were launched here, then reinforced by some American aircraft coming from Utah. But 7 aircraft, first of all, British and Australians. And so they tried to fly here, and actually they had a problem, those pilots. They had to fly pretty low to see where they would drop their rockets without killing anybody on the beach or inland, because most of the villages were not evacuated here. And because they were flying pretty low because of the fog, 4 out of the 7 British and Canadian aircraft were blown up by the German anti-aircraft cannons. And guess where they fell? Not on the cliffs, not on the villages, on the beach, killing more soldiers. So Bradley was really desperate, and Giro said, maybe now we have to use the Navy. The Navy, you know, the destroyers, they were 5 to 10 miles offshore. They were pretty well hidden, The Germans, with their rifles, they couldn't neutralize the warships. We saw that with Ponduac. So the only way was to use the warships with their powerful cannons to neutralize the upper parts of the cliff. They had powerful raiders, so with those raiders they could strike very well the cliffs without killing anybody on the beach. So the question is asked, why Bradley didn't use first of all the Navy, and then as a complement to the Navy, the Air Force, and not the opposite? So he made a big mistake here, a big strategical mistake. And finally, in 2 hours, those bunkers, little bunkers, were all neutralized. The German soldiers were killed inside, for those who resisted. For the others who smelled some roasted chicken, for them, who saw that it was impossible to resist more. So they preferred to run away. But in the end, actually, we had the French resistance. And the French resistance could create some traps in the roads to capture the soldiers. So once they were captured by the French resistance, the French resistance had to keep them until the arrival of the Americans. And finally, this beach was completely secured, safe at 6 p.m. So they needed more or less 12 hours to take this beach under their control. Imagine the last exit, which was open, was the road we came from, D1. It was open at 5. So the soldiers who were here, they didn't have any other choice than waiting almost 11 hours. With high tide, with low tide, with the German threat, with the obstacles, etc. So at the end of D-Day, after 6:30, most of the soldiers were in and in the villages. But you will see the villages like Bayeux are very, very narrow. The streets are very narrow. So each time an exit was open, the Americans took the exit at the same moment with the vehicles, etc. And it was not volunteered, but they created some traffic jams. And so when the convoy was stopped, the German snipers who were behind the windows or behind in the steeples of the church opened the fire, killing more Americans. So the Americans, the situation was this one. At the end of D-Day, they established a beachhead of more or less 1.5 miles inland. So they reached Formigny. Normally they would reach this red pointed line just here. It was the Allied objective at the end of D-Day. They would take under their control parts of the National 13, so the main road linking Caen to Cherbourg, which is now the highway, and would reach Trévière and the swamps there. Unfortunately, it was not the case. After 7 p.m. here we had another reinforcement, so we had the rest of the engineers as well as the rangers, so they had to consolidate the 5 breaches and to clean the beach like for Utah Beach. So cleaning the beach was very important, taking off all the obstacles, the wrecks of the tanks. For the doctors, the moment also to count all the soldiers who were dead or were wounded and to transport them to the hospitals or to the 2 temporary cemeteries and to identify them. It was very important to do this here on this beach, particularly as well as on Gold Beach, to welcome on the next day the first elements of Mulberry A here and Mulberry B on Gold Beach, the 2 artificial harbors. Very, very important to do this. And so just to give you the number of soldiers who fell in action here and the casualties. So according to the official number given by the American government at the end of the war, here landed on this beach between 34 and 35,000 soldiers. We don't have the exact number. Whom 3,800 casualties, wounded, missing in action, and dead. And whom of those casualties we had between 700 and 900 of them who passed away, who were killed here or washed away, drowned and washed away. But the American government, at the end of the war, didn't count all the soldiers who were washed away by the sea and rejected a couple of days, couple of weeks after D-Day, as well as a majority of the soldiers who stayed trapped in their tanks. So if we count everybody, imagine during 3 weeks after D-Day, every day the civilians here recuperated dead bodies and had to confine them, of course, to the American authorities for identification and for burying them in the cemetery. So if we count everybody, this is an estimation. We would have around 5,000 casualties on this beach, whom between 1,000 and 1,500 of them died. 1,500 and 2,500 of them died. So even if we don't have exactly the same numbers with the American government, Omaha stayed the most dangerous and most murderous of the five landing beaches, and so that's why the veterans nicknamed it Bloody Omaha. Do you have any questions?
Do you know how many people died on all the beaches that day, or?
Only on this beach.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the day, we had, if we count the five landing beaches, we had around 15,000 casualties
Wow.
between Utah and Sword Beach. So who more or less 5,000 soldiers who died. So here, first of all, here Omaha was the most murderous. The second most murderous was Juno Beach. Then we had Sword, Gold, and Utah, and the airborne divisions there. So 15,000 casualties at the end of the day out of the 156,000 soldiers who landed here. So I would say 10% of losses more or less. It was better than expected by Eisenhower. Eisenhower actually was expecting over 40% casualties. Most of the soldiers, you know, it sounds terrible when I talk to you about the history of the soldiers who landed here, but you know, most of the soldiers had most of the problems inland. It was not here. So if you talk to a veteran now, he will say the beaches finally they were not so terrible than fighting inland against the Germans in the hedgerows of Saint Louis. More soldiers were killed inland than here on the beaches. It was more terrible there inland, like with the hedgerows, with the swamps, than here on the beaches. So the bunker you saw behind, this is the WN-65. Inside we had and we still have the 50 millimeters anti-tank cannon. So here you can see a little bit the difference between where we were, so Charlie and Dog Sector. Here the soldiers who landed here, they were pretty covered. So they were covered by the sandy dune here. Could be protected from the Germans. So the Germans, they were in the bunkers. We didn't have any German soldiers in the cliffs here because too dangerous for them to build some bunkers. Here the cliffs are pretty unstable. So the Germans actually, they were hidden behind the dunes here. So the soldiers who landed here were the soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division. So they had less problems. So when they arrived here, so 6:30, of course, they had to face the German line here. A lot of soldiers died. The tanks, most of them sank also. But here they could run very quickly. The obstacles actually were not a real problem, even if we had anti-personnel mines under the sand and between the pebbles. They could go come along the dune and could spread if you want to in order to avoid the direct shots. And finally, when the Germans because of the lack of ammunitions. The Americans, they attacked, so they created, thanks to the engineers, a breach. So ran 10 here through the dunes and could reach the anti-tank ditch. But you can see the anti-tank ditch, so this is the cannon. You saw the bunker there? So this is this one here. So they had to face this anti-tank ditch here. But actually they had a solution, but the solution was not on the beach. The solution was to use a special British tank. So this tank was brought actually by some some British soldiers from Gold Beach. This is a special Roberts Funnies called the ARC tank, the Armored Ramp Carrier tank. So this tank was not very complicated, was put in the ditch. The ditch was not very deep, maybe a meter deep. And so the carrier, the ramp was spread, and the different other vehicles like this weird truck, amphibious truck, the duck, DUKW, could go through the anti-tank ditch without any problem. So at 10:30 the cannon was neutralized, and at 10:45-11 the first breach was opened by the American soldiers. Up, so here this is the beach, and they came up. Do you see the track which goes up to the cliffs? This is actually the original breach created by the American engineers. So to go to the villages behind. The road we came from was created after the war, of course. And then so here the soldiers, so the first soldiers, they could unload the supplies, the ammunitions of reinforcement, and could hold so the western side of Colville and the eastern side of Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer before noon. But they couldn't go further away because of the German soldiers who were hidden a little bit everywhere behind the house, behind the windows of the houses, German snipers, etc. And those soldiers actually they had to link up with the British who landed on Gold Beach. But the link up wasn't made because in Port-en-Bessin, so you see the white lighthouse. So just after we have a harbor. I don't know if you see it. This is Port-en-Bessin. So this harbor was held by the Germans and very strongly held. So the British who didn't finish right on time on Gold Beach, so they had to come here to attack the gun battery of Longues-sur-Mer before linking up with the Americans. The link up was made only on the 7th of June. So we had a continuous beach head between Omaha and Juno Beach on the 7th of June. Because the Canadians and the British on the other side, they could link up. So here we didn't have a lot of damages compared to the soldiers who landed on the other side, because the soldiers they were more protected and they were more experienced also than our National Guard units. So here actually this part was maybe the less mergers of the different sectors of Omaha Beach. Okay?
Quite a sight, hey Nana?
So here we are in one of the two American war cemeteries of Normandy. This one is the biggest one. It's really the most visited of all the American war cemeteries of Europe, with over 1 million visitors a year. So before having this beautiful cemetery here, we had contemporary one. So we are still overhanging Omaha Beach. We are on the eastern side of Omaha, so sector 4, right. So here we're buried all the soldiers who fought in action. First of all on Omaha Beach on the sector, and the soldiers who died a little bit further away. 1948, the American government actually couldn't maintain all the different temporary cemeteries we had here in Europe or in North Africa. So gave the opportunity to the American next of kins to either ship the soldiers back home, to bring them back home, or to bury the fallen them here. So it was also according to the wish of each of the soldiers, because before dying, some soldiers wrote, I want to be buried where I will fall in action. So 60% of the American soldiers buried in all the temporary cemeteries were brought back home, and the others, they were buried in the different cemeteries here in Europe, for most of them in France. So here it took more or less 8 years to create the cemetery, between 1948 and 1956. So here you will see, by walking through the cemetery, you will have many soldiers who died in 1944 or 45. You have also soldiers who died in 1942, 43, 44, 45, and until 1995. So those who died, those who have their date of death finishing by 46, 7, 8 in the years after the 50s. They were soldiers who fell in action during the war, but their bodies were found, and finally they were put here. And it was put the date of their burial, not the date of death, because we don't know that. So here are buried 9,380 soldiers. Most of them are Americans, but you have also some foreigners buried here. You have 2 British, 5 Canadians, and one more surprising, 1 Mexican buried here. And among all of them, we have 4 women buried here. 3 of them were working for the Postal Service, and another one who was considered as a civilian. She was a nurse for the Red Cross. And 3 out of the 4 women are African Americans. Were African Americans, and they are the only ones buried here. So 1956, when the cemetery was inaugurated, France decided to give this piece of land definitely, permanently, to the United States of America. So today, this site owns to the American Battle Monuments Commission. So this is a commission which is piloted by the Veterans Affairs and the American government. But it's not an American territory. You didn't have to show your passport before entering here. It's a concession, so that means it functions like an embassy. Here you can see those gravestones very well lined up. You can see their shapes. So we have the most of the Latin crosses. Very important for you in the US that the religion is. So the families, they ask to change all the gravestones. Before we had wooden gravestones, so wooden cross, wooden Star of David, but nothing very beautiful like this. So they changed all the gravestones with only donations, and so they put these Latin crosses for the Christian soldiers, Catholic Protestants, some Orthodoxes also, and we have 150 stars of David for the Jewish soldiers. We have more than 150 Jewish soldiers here, but the others, they were buried under a Latin cross because their families, they didn't want to show the soldiers as a Jewish soldier or as a Muslim soldier, because we have some Muslims here, but as one of the 1,000 living soldiers who came to liberate France and fell in action. So on the first side, we don't have a lot of information finally about the soldiers. So what can you find? You find here the name of the soldier, of course, with, I don't know if we have some of them here. So, and none but to God was. Exactly, so well, you will see through the cemetery, you have 300 of them. From the single pilot to the general, three generals buried here, who did like so Eisenhower as to all the generals, Bradley, here Giraud, Collins, Barton, and the others to stay ahead of the warships and to lead their soldiers from the warships. Teddy Roosevelt said, no, I don't want this. I want to be with my men on the beaches. This is my role. Finally, he came against Eisenhower. Eisenhower let him do what he wanted to do, and he died on the 12th of June 1944, not because he was killed. He died of a heart attack. He was just turning 56. And for this heroic action, because he was the only general during the Utah Beach, and on the following beaches in general, he had the Medal of Honor. He is one of the 3 soldiers who received the Medal of Honor. We have also one World War I soldier buried here. So this is Quentin Roosevelt, the younger brother of Teddy Roosevelt. He died on the 14th of July 1944. He was a pilot in the Air Force and was buried in a cemetery, World War I cemetery in northern France before being repatriated here when Teddy Roosevelt was brought here in 1950. So the total purpose of the cemetery from the 17th of December was incorporated. This is the chapel you have over there. I invite you to go to the chapel. There are very beautiful mosaics. So very quickly now, if you turn around, you have facing the cemetery, facing us, this memorial here. So this memorial, reflected by the pool, I think you saw it if you watch the movie Private Ryan, so at the beginning of the movie, but you certainly don't know the signification of this statue. So the statue here, the symbol of the statue is the rising of the American spirit from the tides. So here the statue honors all the soldiers, very young soldiers, they were 20, 25 years old, who landed here and paid, so either their lives or sacrificed a part of their lives for the freedom of France. And a statue also, so going to the sky, rising up to the sky, rising up to the freedom and to the eternal heaven for the soldiers who are buried just here. And behind, so I'll pick you up in front of the statue behind, we'll leave together the cemetery through the second and